Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition Dungeon Master bullet point problem. Alright, so let me explain what this Dungeon Master bullet point problem is. By the way, everything I'm saying in this video is specific to 5th edition and Dungeons & Dragons. And yeah, so let's go forward. So, I am increasingly under the opinion that calling someone to be a dungeon master needs to be done hesitantly, carefully, and with great consideration. Calling anyone to be a dungeon master is fraught with risk. All right, so now, why is that? Well, here's why. Once you begin down the life path that is being a dungeon master, it is transformative and it will change you in fundamental ways. And the reason why is when you say to someone, I think you should be a dungeon master, what you're really saying is that there are 10 disciplines that normal human beings spend entire lifetimes trying to master even one. So there are 10 bullet point there are 10 disciplines, each one that sits as simply a bullet point, a component of being a good dungeon master. Being a good dungeon master is 10 plus disciplines that you are called to master as a dungeon master. If you will be a good dungeon master, you need a good knowledge of all of these, and really to be a dungeon master, it's not a dungeon gooder, it's not a dungeon okayer, it's a dungeon master. That word has very significant real meaning. It exists today. There have been people that have tried to knock that word down because they know, master means to have full control over this thing and be able to, and by the way, you should only master things. You can only, master means to have, a high level of proficiency, right? And each one of these disciplines, these 10 plus disciplines, at least 10, I've identified 10 so far, is so critically important that it means you really have to master these disciplines. And so when you say when you say I think you should be a dungeon master, what you're really saying is the shape you had planned for your life no longer exists. And I need your capabilities, your willingness, your confidence, your courage, all to be stretched and warped beyond what a normal person's life is. No normal person says, I will master 10 disciplines. But a call to be a dungeon master is a call to master at least 10 disciplines. All right? Now, I'm not going to list those disciplines in this video. I'm going to set this video here, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the risks that I talked about, right? And then I'm going to do subsequent videos that will list each discipline and exactly why those disciplines are important, why they belong under the DM umbrella, and why, under the DM umbrella, what happens if you fail to master them, and what they mean specifically once a person tries to master these unique disciplines. But in this video, we're just going to be talking about this idea that that the call to be a dungeon master is really a call to master 10 separate disciplines that most normal human beings spend an entire lifetime trying to master even one. Okay? All right. So what are the risks? How is it risky to ask people this? Well, I've listed one already, right? This is not a normal request, right? There are just so many, we are like, hey, are you interested in acting, right? You should probably go get a degree about that, right? And many people do. There are acting degrees, right? And then you'll get your degree, and then you'll go to classes after that, and you'll always be expanding, and so we want you, and so one person would spend a lifetime mastering even one thing that is a sub item, underneath, and that's just it. Calling people to say, oh, hey, a normal human tries an entire lifetime to get acting right. It's a sub bullet for you now, right? And guess what? It's not even going to be your profession, right? It is an outrageous request of someone. It is truly an outrageous request, because once you set someone in motion to be a dungeon master, they have the possibility of falling in love with it, right? It's incredibly attractive, right? Where else are four people going to say, you control the weather, the deities of this world, my player character inhabits, and here's 4 hours of my life, right? Every week, right? It's there's nothing. It's incredibly attractive. So when they fall in love with it, they are going to try to be good at dungeon mastering. And once you begin the path down into it, you realize, oh my gosh, I really do need to master these 10 disciplines to be a dungeon master, not a dungeon gooder or a dungeon okayer, but a dungeon master. It's literally in the title, right? And so the title itself is this warning. So what are the risks, right? Well, what if they get it wrong? And here's the issue. So each discipline has its own pitfalls and could be significantly impacting. Significantly impacting. Okay. And then in addition to that, what if they find they can't be a good dungeon master? So I watched a great interview probably about 3 or 4 years ago. Kate Welch was still with Dungeons and Dragons and Wizards of the Coast, and she was talking to Satine Phoenix, and the two of them addressed this issue, right? Wizards of the Coast is hyper aware that being a dungeon master is incredibly difficult, powerfully difficult, and that good dungeon masters are incredibly rare, right? And that a lot of people, we already know this. Nerd Immersion did a great video about this. That most campaigns they end after 6 sessions, right? And so they're aware that there just aren't that many good dungeon masters, and so they need more, right? And so Satine Phoenix and Kate Welch were both like, we know there's a lot of people are nervous about it. You just need to give it a try, and you need to jump in there. The water's warm. Jump into the pool. It's okay. Don't be afraid, right? And I remember, and I know why they did that. They desperately want people to not be afraid of being a dungeon master. Increasingly, I think people should be very wary of stepping forward and beginning the path to being a good dungeon master, because it just makes demands on your life that nothing else does, okay? So what happens if you get it? So we already talked about each discipline has its own pitfalls, which can have major ramifications and can very much impact your life negatively, right? Here's the next one, right? What if you find you can't do it, right? Now, I'm incredibly blessed. I thank the Lord above. I have, there's a few things I'm good at, right? Like, I'm not great at everything. You don't want me to change the oil in your car, right? Like, and frankly, I'm not good with any mechanical tools, right? But there are a few things in my life I'm good at, and one of them provides for my family, and the other one is dungeon mastering. And I might have 1 or 2 other things that I'm good at, but basically, I am good at dungeon mastering. But I will tell you right now, I fell in love with dungeon mastering, like, on the second game I did it in when I was 12 years old. And it would have broken my heart if I had not been able to do it. And I think there are people who start down the road of dungeon mastering and going, no, I'm not this superhuman. I'm not a person who can pursue actively 10 different disciplines simultaneously and master them all for the purposes of something that isn't even what I use to provide and feed myself, right? It is such a huge, huge call, right? And so, and honestly, the other thing is you're like, well, they failed at something. And again, I'm very used to, I've had failures in my life. I think that robust lives, right, have failures, right? And so I've had failures, and I'm not afraid to put my best efforts down and fail again, right? But most people are not like that. In fact, I think increasingly I see a lot of people in life constructing lives where the pins they knock down are 10 feet away, and they set up pins specifically that they can knock down so that there is no failure in their life, and they do not need to struggle at all with failure, okay? And failure can be devastating to people. And in the old days, right, 80s, 90s, we're like, rub some dirt on it, shut up, keep moving, right? That's not the case anymore. We now have a much better, much broader understanding of mental health. And the idea that, if I fall down and I break my wrist, oh my gosh, my body's broken, I am fundamentally, in a bad state, right? Well, now, if you have a major failure, you come across some major, you learn something about your life that you're not able to, to deal with, that can cause a major mental health break, right? And major failures can be a major mental health problem. So we're starting to understand that humans are not just breakable physically, we are breakable psychologically, right? And these psychological breaks can come from major failures or discoveries about ourselves, right? And I never discovered that I was a bad dungeon master. In fact, I discovered its exact opposite. It was like I was born for this, right? And it really is a wonderful thing to me. But I will tell you right now, I would be devastated if I ever, learned that no, this thing that's super important to you that you have dedicated yourself to at a specific level, you can't do, right? So there are very real risks about failing this. Last thing I'll say about the DM bullet point problem is, again, if you're calling somebody to be a dungeon master, and you realize that means there are 10 disciplines at least that they need to master, and it's going to warp aspects of, they're going to need to stretch. Like a good example of this would be like Arnold Schwarzenegger, and major bodybuilders, their skin literally stretches, right? Like they in order to become what they are, parts of their bodies are stretched, right? And that's what a dungeon master is. It's like essentially an intellectual Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? Your mind, your heart, your spirit are stretched. They're pulled beyond what a normal human is called to, right? And if you're going to be calling for that, you're like, wait, why are we doing this? Is it a game? Some people think it is. I think that's small vision. I really do. I think that's small heart, right? If you really are paying attention, the call to be a dungeon master, here's what explains it. Go look at any of the early Dragon magazines. You know what they say on the cover? And Gary Gygax was there when it started, right? They say, mastering the game and beyond. The Dragon magazine on every cover was saying, this is more than mastering the game. This is about mastering yourself. This is about mastering life. This is about abandoning bound identity, right? So thank you for your patience. All of the other videos will link back to this video as I list out each discipline that we are calling people to master, which are literally just bullet points that exist under, bullet points that exist under the umbrella of Dungeon Master. And again, we should be incredibly hesitant to call people into this path because it can really change them. I think if we're careful, most people that we call to be Dungeon Masters, when we call them there, they will begin down the road and find, like I found, that they can do it, right? Not because everybody can do it, but because we're carefully choosing people we think have a chance to do it, right? But calling people to this willy-nilly seems very unwise to me. Like, we really need to be careful as we proceed. All that's my opinion, right? Can you guess any of the disciplines that I will nest underneath? What do you think of dungeon mastery? Do you think that maybe what Satine Phoenix and what Kate Welch were saying is they were really ignoring the master part and just saying, be a dungeon gooder, be a dungeon okayer, please, we desperately need you to try, right? And that they weren't thinking about the risks to people failing to be dungeon masters. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.